Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Red Path. You're joining us for another episode of Competitive Insights. It's Dara and Brian here with you today, and we are going to be talking again about Vessels of Wrath, everyone's favorite World Eater detachment. And we are specifically going to be talking about a list which has emerged from all of our playtesting. We're calling it the BROSIE2K, named after Brian and Josie, who kind of co-invented it, invented the same list pretty much at the same time, and have since found a lot of success with it. Brian, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good, Dar. Just in general, I'm happy to see that the list is doing well in other people's hands because I was really excited about it. Honestly, I was being really obnoxious about it pretty early on because everybody was like, "Oh, what should we put in there?" And I was like, "War dogs, war dogs," and everybody was like yelling at me. I know you're basically spraying me with a little
The
like
the
water spray
hose,
bottle,
yeah,
like
right,
the hose. But now look who's using war dogs. Now
yeah,
look who's doing it. So Vessels of Wrath are also like consistently popping off, or at least staying neck and
yeah,
neck with Berserker Warband.
yep,
And all of the events I'm going to, they're about 50-50 vessels versus Berserker Warband, which is nice to see. I mean,
yeah.
that's what we've wanted this whole time is diversity. We have it.
I think it's fair to
So
say that Vessels is like actually improving, or sorry, performing a little bit better than we had originally expected. We thought it was going to like fall behind Butcher Horde a little bit, but it's actually kept up pace with it quite well, and more recently is even overtaking it, which is it's quite interesting. And
it's really weird in the stats because you'll see like 50% win rate Berserker Horde, 20% win rate Vessels, and then the next week it'll
it'll
flip.
like flip. Yeah, it's super
Is it just
matchup
the
dependent,
players
I
getting
guess.
pissed and switching to between mood attachments?
It can be a lot of things, right? But
Yeah.
I think if you look at the running averages over the week, they're coming out at about the same, which is very, very
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah.
I think a product of that could be that the meta we're currently in is actually like favored to Vessels over Berserker Horde because with lots of really strong guns in the game, I think Vessels has a great game into gunline armies, where Berserker Horde obviously still is a pretty good game, but like it'll struggle more. It doesn't have as many
Yeah.
tricks, right?
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie, this meta is awful. I hate it so much
The
right
meta
now.
is not fun right now.
This
Yeah,
is like
it's a
this
rough
is the
meta.
most point click meta I think we've had of 10th edition.
Mm.
Um I mean the edition that's supposed to be less lethal. I just got tabled in 2 turns by Bridgehead the other day. And really nothing I can do about it. And that isn't even the most lethal army out there. There's like 2 other ones that are more lethal than this. And being able to go wide, right? Because Vessels allows you to go wider because you don't have this 425, 35 point sink in your army. In addition, like attaching characters, not attaching characters, like you're actually encouraged to play a little bit more of our roster. Um, and then having in the allied brigands, for example, in this list that we're going to run through, allow you to deal with like 10-man guard screens and
Yeah.
really stop your opponent from doing like occupying the majority of the board. This is not a meta that I really like being mono melee in.
Yeah, no, for sure. For sure, for sure. It's an interesting time. I think like obviously we've been kind of like workshopping different vessels lists an awful lot, particularly in our Patreon competitive Discord, which if you're not already a member, worth signing up. You get to have a lot of really interesting conversations with us in there. And there's actually like quite a lot of like really good World Leader players in there now who are kind of also filling in and giving advice, like Josie being one of them. Is great because we get to have her insight, which inevitably kind of ties in actually an awful lot with my own playstyle as well, which is great. I get that positive reaffirmation in the chat where you guys are normally trying to beat me down. But yeah, definitely check it out. The link is in the description below. But today we're going to go through this BROSIE2K list. We're going to talk about what is in it and then how it kind of works on the tabletop and why you might want to consider it if you're very interested in non-ground vessel lists, because we think right now this is probably one of the most competitive iterations of non-ground vessels. It's not definitely not the only competitive iteration of, but it's a very, very good one. It's got a good toolbox, but I think you need to have a certain kind of play style to make it really shine, but it works in a lot of different
Yeah,
situations.
and I'm gonna go ahead before we get too far into this. Like this list is hard to play
Mm,
optimally.
yeah.
You need to have your turns planned out early in advance. You need to be thinking about your auras. You need to be because the World Leader roster is crazy with our movement, but everything has a crazy different level of movement. Like or move 9 on certain things, move 8 on other things, move 6. That can screw up all your auras. And Vocatus is running around moving 12, 14. Juggernaut Lord, same thing. So. if you get frustrated with this list, guys, don't blame the list. Just try to like focus on like fixing these little things, and I promise that some results will come from it. Because like it's a sick list. I've always been a fan of it since pretty much when Vessels dropped.
Yeah.
So without further ado, Dar, you want to take us through the list?
Why don't you do it since you're one of the co-authors?
I am one of the co-authors. Okay, sweet. So the list is going to look. All right, I'll walk through the list and then talk about a little bit of my thought process for why there are inclusions and why there's not inclusions.
Sounds good.
So starting off, the man, the myth, the legend, Khorne the Betrayer, we have him back in the list. It's nice to see him back. He's overtaking Mo, in my opinion, for this spot, and we'll get into that later once we get talking about strats and lethality and all that. So we have Khorne the Betrayer. We have the, as I call it, the Ghost Prince, walking Prince on foot, with the go through walls, go through units enhancement. We have the, as I dub him, the Slaughter Knot, which is the Juggernaut Lord with the Arch Slaughter enhancement. And then I have Lord Invocatus to round that out. Then off into our battle line, we have our classic 2x10 Jackals. Can't leave home without them, even in a detachment that really doesn't utilize their lethality. You still need them to screen, you still need them to space out, and those icon rerolls. Although they're not necessary anymore, they still will help you hit. You can still get awkward bad rolls, so having just a couple rerolls pretty much makes your blood dice consistent for Vessels of Wrath. You don't need any more than that. After that, we have a 10-man Berserker squad to go probably with Khorne. I don't have to. And then a 5-man Berserker squad sticking around just to round out the points and make it a nice even 2K points on the head. Also, 5-man Berserkers are just incredibly useful. They are a funny late game Vessels target anyways, because they can be. In turn 1, you can advance and charge these guys up the board with lethal sustained, wipe a screen pretty reliably. I like them. And then after that, we have a Rhino for the 10 Berserkers, 2x6 Exalted 8-pound. And then finally, to round the list out, we have 2 War Dog Brigands. Should be exactly 2,000 points on the head. There's a few choices in here that are very different from Berserker Warband, notably that we're actually including gun platforms from the RB2K. We have no regular 8-bound in this list at all, which I really don't think are necessary in Berserker Warband. Or sorry, in Vessels of Wrath. Absolutely necessary in Berserker Warband. And then we have no Mo, and we're bringing Khorne. Those are the notable, like, standout differences. And then also a Juggernaut Lord, which is not something you get to see very often. So I
And
guess
the
like,
Demon Prince, right?
and the
Like,
Prince and the
yeah.
Footprints, which I
It's
was,
like the whole thing is apart from like yeah, big chunks of Exalted 8-bound, like
which
everything else is pretty
so
spicy, right?
like,
Yeah.
yeah, even then that's spicy. Like you're not normally running 2x6
Mm.
Exalted.
Hmm.
Here they are, like, and the list does definitely need the Exalted to
Yeah,
function. They're probably the
for
most
sure.
critical piece, which is why we have the Demon Prince to make the
Hmm.
Exalted stick around. So I guess we can just start at the top and start at the
Yeah.
top of the list and talk our way through all of the like inclusions.
We can
And I
talk about
guess
why the list is the way it is, and then maybe we can touch on strategies, ways to sort of play this list, because as we said, it's a complicated list to play. The first time you try this, if you've no experience with it, unless it really, really suits your playstyle, you're maybe going to be a little bit confused with exactly how it works. There's a learning curve to it, but when this list works, it feels so good.
it feels
Like
so
it's
good.
so good.
It's
And
kind of
it
toxic
works.
too.
It's pretty toxic and it has great game into like a
And
broad range of the field. I haven't run into anything yet which I would say is like a really bad matchup for it, you
and
know?
I guess before we start nailing down the individual data sheets and strats, I'm going to start by just summarizing my thoughts of Berserker Warband versus Vessels of Wrath. And that is Berserker Warband can train you to be a little lazy with your movement, with your threat prioritization, um, stacking buffs, right? Like Angron makes contact with something, that thing's dead. 6 Exalted 8-bound make contact with something. +1 to wound, that thing's dead, right? Mo +10, probably one shot. Most things in the game, same thing with 8-bound charge 10 cultists, you pick them up. Vessels of Wrath does not have that luxury, right? Losing the +1 strength, +1 attack is a huge hit, but in exchange for that, you get a little bit of reliability. You get to go where you want. You get to play a little bit of Wolf Jail too, which we'll get into. But where I'm going with this is when you're playing Vessels of Wrath, when you're playing this list, you need to be actively thinking about, okay, what is the math that I actually kill what's in front of me? You can't just blind charge things and assume that you just pick it up. Because you know what? Angron and Exalted 8-bound from the previous attachment have spoiled us a little bit with that, right? So that leads us into why we're actually taking Khorne in this list because
Hell
we're
yeah.
losing a little bit of that lethality, right?
However, where
Um,
can we find lethality again?
which that's one thing that he's always had.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
reason why we don't play him in the RB2K is honestly, he's a luxury piece for Berserker Warband because the list already hits hard enough that it doesn't need Karn, right? The dude hits
Hmm.
like a truck, but is he going to beat out Mo for his role? Is he going to beat out Rapid Ingress Exalted? Probably not. But in this list where we don't hit as hard, we definitely want that man back. And with the strat to be +1 AP, +1 strength, and full rerolls to wound, this squad, even though it's wounding on fives, charging a greater demon will still rip it to pieces, Karn
And I
plus
think
10.
you have to always consider that, like, generally when that unit comes out of its Rhino, it's the vessel target as well. So, I mean, I don't know about your experience, but I've always had my Rhino in a position where I don't need a movement buff on it. So when those guys hop out, they 90% of the time have lethal and sustained, which is
Yep.
something that 10 Berserkers just don't have in Berserker Horde, like, ever. So you've got your double lethal sustained reroll hits and wounds of one from Karn. You've got potentially +1 strength and AP. You've got reroll wounds if you need it to into a vehicle or monster. Like that unit will actually like blend a
It kills
significant
all
amount of
it,
targets.
it kills most things in the game. Just
Hmm.
period outright. Even though you're wounding on fives into the big things, full rerolls to wound. It's exactly the tool that needed. If not, you're still gonna walk through anything that's infantry related. Even like scary Terminators, they'll actually, I think, do more damage in this detachment into like Deshra Terminators than they do in the Berserker Warband
Yeah,
detachment with the
I've
+1
I've
wound.
played them into Death's Dark Angels a couple of times, Deathwing Knights,
Oh, they'll
and
pick them up.
they walk through them. Yeah, it's just like I don't care that you're -1 damage, you know.
So Karn, absolutely necessary in my opinion. I'm glad to have him back. Um, your trade-off is like with the Master of Executions, without the +1 strength, +1 attack, and +1 damage. He really isn't screaming to, or I mean, you still get +1 damage in this attachment if you want it, but it's a little bit harder and a little bit more restrictive, not as blanket statement. So that's why I value Karn over Mo, because I just want
Hmm.
that extra oomph brick.
I guess
So
the question that people may put to us regarding that switch, which we might as well address now. Um, so obviously, by not taking Mo, you don't have an option for fight first in this list, which some people might kind of that might be like a red flag for them, right? And I think it's fair to say that in a world where you're playing this list and you know how it works, you're probably outskilling most other combat related opposition. And if you utilize tricks like Rhino drifting or Jackal tar pitting or multi charging with the right units into enemy fight first units, it isn't really a problem, you know, not having fight first. I thought it was going to be a problem when I started running vessels and not running Mo. And I have played like probably 60% combat opponents, and I've not found it a problem yet.
or another thing that this detachment actually has up on Berserker Warband in those matchups that's a good tool is you actually, I find myself rarely picking fight on death in Berserker Warband, but like casually, like I don't need advance and charges turn, I don't need lethal hits. I'm just gonna go feel no pain, sustained hits, and you know what? All three of my vessels targets have fight on death. Super valuable being able to nickel and dime that extra close because in this attachment is a little bit weaker into those melee matchups and will rely on, as Dara was mentioning, those close combat tricks, which we've mentioned quite a bit on the channel. Look around. I mean, Dara,
Yeah.
Ryan, and I'll be putting out a few more how-tos for a couple of those. But into our next unit, we have the Slaughter Knot,
Oh, the
which
boy.
is my
God, this
favorite
unit.
unit.
Dude,
I
this
fucking
guy is
love this
so much
dude.
fun. He's so much fun to use.
So
Oh, I love him.
and when we did our live stream for this attachment, we were all just like new Mo. We were like well, we still have Clay Mo, right? Actually, that's incorrect. Don't I this is not this is a trap. This enhancement is a trap to be putting on a Master of Executions because it means that you have to be making the Master of Executions your vessel's target even when you may not want to. When in reality, you want this beast running around being the vessel's target. He can run solo and one-shot war dogs on average, or he can run with your six-man brick to give you a little bit more oomph reliability, which I've done both. Honestly, it's a hard answer to say which is better to attach him
It
to,
depends. It
and
depends
it
on the
really
matchup.
is the
Yeah.
matchup. But this dude walks into the room with 11 damaged 3 attacks. Like hitting on twos and threes with Lance. He has the grenades keyword, and he actually has like the reliability to go out and mulch stuff. Give him full rerolls to wound into a war dog and watch that war dog disappear
He's
with
really a
load sustain.
multi-purpose unit. Like he can do all that. He can be your early skirmisher piece if you need him to. He can be
Hmm.
like another Invocatus in that role. Um, I guess I found in my own experience, he's been attached to the six man exalted the predominant amount of the time. Obviously, sometimes I haven't. I think it's probably a good one to talk about is like exactly how what do you recognize when you're going up against someone that's like a trigger for attaching him or not attaching him? And for me, it's I look at my opponent's army and I say, is there something in this army that a six man exalted squad can't kill, but a six man with him would kill?
Will absolutely
And
make.
if there isn't, if I'm gonna kill everything in that army with a six man exalted, or reliably enough anyway, I'm just never attaching him because then it's just another unit that can do actions, another unit that can be a vessel's target, a unit that can just be in places that I need a unit to be, and that's my criteria. I don't know if that's different for you.
And that's something else that I absolutely agree. Something else to also consider is if you're on a board where you have to get across that board as fast as physically possible, like you're on Hammer Anvil or Hammer Anvil against Tau, right? We've lost access to the auto six strat, and in exchange, by attaching this dude, you get rerolls to your advance and rerolls to your charge. I won't
And your
go.
surge, which you can proc with that
Yep,
stratagem to surge,
yep.
which is great. I've had that come up a lot.
Yep. So like a 7-inch charge, like if I'm auto advancing six and going for a 7-inch charge turn one, I'm probably not doing it, right? I'm gonna have no CP turn one. I'm not gonna just risk the whole game right out the gate on a 7-inch charge. And this detachment, if I don't have to spend the CP and I got to reroll my advance to see if I actually wanted to go for it, and it's 7-inch rerolling, I'm probably gonna go for it, right? So this guy gives you a little bit more of that like reach to
Mm.
just try to get across the board too, if you see in a matchup that you really need to get across. Because as we're going to get into once we get to the Exalted Eightbound and the Demon Prince and all the strats, it's very important to get into your opponent's face fast with the Exalted Eightbound. So speaking of Demon Prince, Dara, you've been the
Oh,
champion
it's
for
my
this dude
boy,
forever, so I'll
dude.
let you take that one.
Oh, I'm so glad it's like his time in the sun because he's been fermenting for a while. Yeah, so the Demon Prince is great if you have not kind of been like aware of my fixation with this unit for the last year. His ability obviously gives 4 up invulnerable save to the Exalted Ape Band nearby, or
One
5
of
up to the Zerks and Jacks.
strangely one of the most nerfed abilities in 40K,
Weirdly
10th
has been
edition.
nerfed like three
Like three
times.
times, yeah.
Yeah, sure, okay.
Despite never doing better than a 3-2 or whatnot.
It's super weird. So yeah, obviously, I think probably the hottest like talking point, particularly in our Patreon chat, has been, do you drop this guy? Is he worth it with the Exalted or not? I think he's first of all, he's only worth it if you've got a double Exalted 8 band brick, which we do in this list. And then the question is he worth it even then? And I think that is like very, very determined by how you like to play. And I think the BROSIE2K generally enjoys, where it can, a bit of a more passive aggressive style with lots of staging before you make your big push. That staging is massively helped if your Exalted 8 band can be more survivable. And in a world where Imperial Guard and Eldar are pounding you with indirect, you want those Exalted 8 band to be able to be safe in their rune. And a 4 up invulnerable with a 5 up Feel No Pain is definitely the way to go for that. And I think a lot of the time people don't really like look past that, right? In terms of what does the Demon Prince do? Like their opinion is entirely skewed on did I roll lots of fours with my Exalted 8 band when they were near him? But like that's not really the case. I think um, the Demon Prince is probably the hardest skill curve unit in this army to learn how
Oh,
to
by
use.
a
Like by
mile, right?
it's not
And
even close.
and I think the biggest mental trap you can fall into with this dude, because he's expensive. Like he
Yeah.
costs a lot of points for what he does. And honestly, with a I won't say disappointing data sheet, but if you look at him like he's a Demon Prince of Khorne and you expect him to do Demon Prince of Khorne things, you're going to be disappointed every single time.
Mm-hmm.
He's not going to go out there and he's not going to go one, like he loses most 1v1s to anything that is at his point level.
Yeah.
This dude is a bully. He is a fifth grader on a playground full of kindergartners, and he just wants to push everybody off their slides. And that's
Yeah.
exactly how you should be using him, in my opinion. But
I think the main thing is that people get hyper fixated on a need to constantly have all 12 Exalted 8 band right next to him. And that's just not the case. Generally speaking, there might be a setup turn where you do have that, where you're like
Hmm.
hanging out in the rune and they're all 12 there. To be honest, that's rarely even the case for me. I normally have them with just six, and there's another six on a different flank altogether. Some people may play that differently, but you know. So the way that I like to play him and six Exalted are like a flank, you know? I'm like, I can put these seven models in this area, and they're going to bully a flank for most of the game, along with maybe the five Khorne Berserkers or, you know, a Brigand or something. And the ability for him to move through walls and enemy units is incredibly useful. It really gets over the biggest problem with him before, which was navigating around terrain. And it means he can just kind of like boom through something and be a sudden surprise, right? The fact that that's not restricted to the movement phase is incredibly exploitative. I have heroically intervened this guy through walls, and my opponents have just been like, "Excuse me, where did this guy come from?" You know, it's like it's the biggest surprise I'm here model ever, and it's great. Like you can do an awful lot of jank with charging as well with this guy, like charging over things, which like people generally forget that he can do that. It's like vessels is like information overload for your opponent because there's so many things that you can do to them that to remember everything is like pretty much impossible for all four turns of main action of the
Yeah.
game. And you're going to make a mistake in some positioning play. And it's about you, the World Leaders player, being able to be like, oh, yeah, I can do this with my Daemon Prince. I can't give you examples because they're like hyper specific to each game, but it's about looking at a board state and being like, yep, I can like move through that unit with my Daemon Prince, hit this enemy unit that my opponent thought was safe, use my Prince to precision out a key
And
character, and then loads of buffs fall down.
and in my opinion, in your go turn, he wants to be tag taming things.
Mm-hmm.
You want to be charging Exalted 8 or Berserkers into something, and also this guy.
Yep.
Or if you can't be tag teaming, you want him out there picking off JPIs, you want him out there picking off scouts. You want him to live for 5 turns of the game because he's just annoying to kill.
And he
Like he's just,
will, like, if you treat him right, he will live for five
and
turns. Like,
because
he can be a target of that -1 to wound stratagem, which
and
is,
he can blood surge.
and he can blood surge. I've used both of these things on him a lot. Like, it's when you have a T10 target with -1 to wound on everything, if he's your
Usually
vessel's
just gets
target,
ignored. Usually
it's
they
just
just
like,
ignore him.
what are you gonna do? You've got strength 7 guns wounding this guy on
No.
sixes, you
So
know?
if you play him conservatively, you keep him on the flanks, you use him as a harassing piece, he's gonna get his points back in value. But
Hmm.
if you just shove him straight down the middle, he'll still die quicker than you were wishing that he would.
Yeah.
Like he's still gonna die very fast. So definitely a hard unit to use. But I think he's critical to the role
Yeah.
of the army of setting up that wolf jail, throwing 12 exalted 8 at your opponent, giving them all their -1 to wound, rerollable blood surge, and the 4-up invuln. It eventually just turns into a headache.
Yeah. All right,
So
let's do we need to talk too much about well, we don't need to talk about Invo because everyone knows what he does.
everyone knows what he
Uh
does. The one thing I will say is I've actually considered attaching him in this detachment way more than I have
that's
previously.
weird. Yeah.
I go
Same.
from, but I mean, I go from never attaching him to maybe 10% of the time when I
Mm,
say way more. So, I mean, he does the same stuff, guys.
yeah.
Nothing here to like really go crazy about.
And we've kind of talked about I mean jackals are jackals, zerks are zerks. We talked about the zerks with Khorne. Um, Obviously hit a little bit like worse. The five-man Zerk unit isn't like, oh, I'm gonna go out and kill like a screen very easily, but is still functionally fine, and it's kind of just where the list is in terms of points. Like, yeah, sure, it'd be
I
nicer if it was
would,
something else, but
yeah, I'd rather it be 3-man 8 instead,
yeah.
but that's not
If
how the
you
points
want,
worked out.
okay, interesting point on that. If you want to make this 3-man 8 band instead of five Zerks, the other variation of this list, which I was running for quite a while, you turn the Brigands into carnivores or stalkers, and then that 5-man Zerk become 3 8 band, which is also a very, very good list, but you don't have the range support. It's just different.
So,
But the 5KB are still fine,
so next up we have the 2x6 Exalted that we really want to get into.
which
We've
this is
kind
the
of
main fulcrum of the list.
right, and when we were talking about like you need Exalted 8 in this list, it's because you don't have the get out of jail free Angron card, right? You just can't go
Mm,
push over your opponent's big knights and just say suffer, right? Like, what's your melee profile? Dead, right? Like, when people ask me what Angron's melee profile is, I'm like, really? You really want to know? Like, most of the time, he's just gonna kill whatever he touches. So that means without Angron in a list, you have to make up for that anti-vehicle because we really don't have it. I mean, Karn with +1 AP, 4 rerolls to wound, probably kills a big knight, Maybe it doesn't, because it's not really that reliable at it. So having the extra, no emphasis on the extra squad of Exalted 8-bound to be able to be there and do that, giving them full rerolls to wound, lethal sustained, stuff's gone. Just stuff is gone and dead, just as lethal as the Berserker Warband. You got to pull out the full combo though, and it does cost you a CP, but you still need them. Now pairing that with the no fallback aura and everything we mentioned before with the Daemon Prince, they really are the core of your list. They're probably going to be the first things that die in your list too, at least in my experience with how I play the list.
Yeah. I think
They're
you
going
play
to
it a
be
lot
that
more
first wave.
aggressively than I do.
I I like to throw them out in the first wave,
Mm.
and then use the Khorne squad to be cleanup, the Slaughterknot to be cleanup. Like the second wave is going to be the Demon Prince, the Slaughterknot, Khorne, and 10, and hopefully I'm getting 4 to 5 turns of shooting out of my brigands. So I want my 12 Exalted 8-bound to throw you in jail, bully you, blood surge into you, transhuman, take an entire turn to kill 9 of the 12 models, and then the rest of the army just comes falling on top of you. That is exactly how I want to play them.
It's
And
ridiculous how brutal they are into a gun line with low leadership. So like Tau, Votan, Star Shatter,
you
where
just
it's
win the game on
like
the spot if they fail a couple of these checks.
and then it's like I was playing a Star Shatter person, and it was basically just like I just rammed so hard into them. Like a bunch of stuff failed to fall back, and I was like, cool, you passed the fall back there. It doesn't matter, you can only move 6 inches. I'm going to be blood surging after you, and I'm going to be -1 toughness on that unit and all this other stuff. And they were just like, God, this is just impossible to deal with. And I was like, by the
And
way, there's
that's
still 10 Berserkers and a Demon Prince about to hit you next turn.
Yeah, and that's still only 600 points of your list. Like there's
Yeah.
still 1,400 points of war leaders that are slowly
I think
creeping
it's
up the
it's
board.
pretty much like something that like collectively everyone's realized is that the 12 exalted 8 bound are like basically mandatory in like any vessels list, you know? It doesn't really matter what variant you're playing. It's just those guys are so brutally oppressive because of the suite of abilities available to them. Um
And
just an incredible piece in the
and
list.
and I guess while we're talking about 8-bound period, I guess I'll cover why there's no regular 8-bound in this
Hmm.
list, which is surprising because in a lot of the tier lists that we've done and a lot of the conversations that we've had, 8-bound, I think, and Berserker Warband are actually some of the most important units in there. Getting that
Yep.
wound reroll aura up is incredibly important. Having that extra scout piece to go skirmish early in the game, also incredibly important. And being able to spam +1 to wound on them, also very important. Um, Strength 9 Lacerators, it's actually a pretty big fall off from being Strength 10
Mm.
Lacerators.
Strength
You go from
5 eviscerators
like,
is yucky.
oh yeah, and then the Lacerators, like I think we like had like the day one math crunch where like 8-bound go from killing a War Dog in Berserker Warband with +1 to wound like 70% of the time to killing a War Dog like 5% of the time in this detachment with lethal sustained up. So my logic is we have Khorne giving out reroll ones to wound, and we have a strat that we're planning on using every single turn of the game if we need it, which is the full wound rerolls. So with access to full wound rerolls and with Khorne seemingly not needing 8-bound around, you don't really need these guys. And Strength 5 isn't really it, right? Like these guys want to be mulching and just pounding their head into many targets in the game that Strength 5 will not cut it for. And I do not want to be spending the CP for full rerolls to wound on these guys. I want
Yep.
to be spending that on the bricks that actually needed to get stuff done. So I'm not saying 8-bound are bad. If I could fit a 1x3 in here, I would. To get the extra wound reroll support up in other spots, and I'd use them more as a support piece than a skirmish piece. You're not going to see me run 2 squads because, like I said, they're just kind of disappointing for their points cost in this attachment. But um, they're not necessary at all, which is nice to see. It's refreshing for me to say you don't have to run 8-bound in a World Eater army, right? Like that's awesome. There are just things better than 8-bound, not the Hellbrute. Um,
I tried.
I got to get my plug in there. So yeah,
Yeah. So
8-bound, and then
that's the
yep,
Brigs are the
and
Brigs, which are great.
which finally off to the sauciest part of it, War Dog Brigands. Why are we running shooting platforms and vessels? Well, if you want to know why, you can also check out Dara's video on how to build a Vessels of Wrath list.
Yep.
In there, he actually hits on it pretty well, which I'll cover real quick. Um, and kind of what I said at the beginning of this video, in a lot of situations where you would be one-shotting things in Berserker's Warband, you don't in this. So having a little bit of extra chip damage, like those 5 Berserkers may not actually pick up 10 Cultists and Vessels of Wrath. But if you have a single Havoc launcher go in there and pick up 3 cultists, then those 5 berserkers are absolutely probably still going to pick that squad up. In addition, going into a big night, you want 6 Exalted 8 to take that brick down. Berserker Warband, they probably do. In Vessels of Wrath, they should. But having an extra Thermal Lance go straight into them to do an extra D6 damage, again, just kill securing. That's all I want this squad to do, or these 2 guys to do. I just want them to walk around the board and make sure that my turns go exactly according to plan. Because this is the wheels can fall off the bus for world eaters real fast when things start to go wrong. In melee, you whiff, you fail some charge rolls, like all of that stuff. These guys are just kind of like a get out of jail insurance card for me, where I just want to be putting a little bit of pressure on the board. They also are fantastic at screening, but still putting pressure down the board. Being able to also clear screens, because although we have more units in this army, or in the army that we're building here, than the RB2K, once you start attaching characters, you very quickly become the same unit count total. So having these guys be there to make sure that you're not getting nickel and dimed by these 10-man guardsman squad just standing in your way, it's really awesome. I love them. Make sure they're shooting 5 turns of the game. Don't shove them out for bad trades. I've even held them back for a couple turns and then put them out because I want them to be part of that go turn. You want to be shoving them out after, at the same time, your 12 Exalted 8-pounder hitting your opponent's front lines, because they're going to be so focused on what's in front of them, they're going to ignore the brigands in the back. And then when you send your wave 2, same thing. You want these brigands just sitting there, getting their value, and thermal lances be thermal lances. Sometimes they do nothing, sometimes they kill God. Melta4 is a hell of a drug. The amount of times I've
So
just
much
don't
fun.
walk up to a Nightbringer and just put him in the dirt, like
Yep.
have this. It's awesome. So I like them. I've always been a fan of War Dogs. Um, I wish we had a Khorne Demon Engine or something to like substitute for them, but is what it is. I do value them over carnivores personally. I am a advocate for carnivores still. I ran them for a little bit in Berserker Warband, but I do advocate for these guys over carnivores just because you need that kind of flexibility to
Yeah, they
support
bring
whichever
something.
flank.
Yeah,
Like yeah, a flank, not every flank is going to go according to plan, and these guys allow you to support that different
mm,
flanks from across the board. So
100%. All right, let's talk a little bit about how you want to play this list, because that's probably the thing that a lot of people are quite interested to hear. And in how I've been playing it, I don't know if this is necessarily the same as you, Brian, but uh, I've been super passive aggressive with this list, which is basically turn 1, turn 2, a lot of staging, just hanging out in the mid board, putting the absolute bare minimum out, doing objective work and trying to bait the enemy in. And then generally speaking, as I said, I'm going to have a flank which is going to be the Daemon Prince and 6 Exalted 8 band, and a different flank which is going to be the other 6 Exalted 8 bands, probably my Rhino staging there as well. And then, the other pieces are where they need to be in various different conditions. A brig to each flank as well, obviously. And once I've baited the enemy in, once we've gotten the early skirmishing out of the way and I'm ready to make my commitment, it's going to be a really big push. It's going to be both the Exalted at the same time. Sometimes it's the Demon Prince, sometimes it's not. A lot of the time it's the Arc Slaughterer guy. Generally, the Zerks and Khorne are going to be my next wave. Like, I usually hold those guys back. I don't think I've had a game where all 12 Exalted got picked up in a single hit back, generally because one of them surging, one of them has the -1 toughness thing. It's just not really possible to pick up all 12 with that level of durability built into the list. So then the next wave is like whatever's left of them. You've got your Zerks. You've got like some random characters which are probably still like alive, like the Prince. Maybe Slaughter Dude is still alive. Maybe Invo's still alive. But basically, you're creating a situation where you have pressured the middle of the board so hard without actually doing anything in the first couple of turns that you've probably accrued quite a point lead. And then on your go turn, you're going to be scoring quite a bunch of points as well. Turns 4 and 5 is just like clawing on and maintaining your lead. Or if you've had a really successful go turn, just closing the noose around the enemy and absolutely choking them out. So it's like that's generally how the format goes, is like staging aggressively but passively, where you're kind of like, you could come here, but I will absolutely smash you. But because you're not coming here, I'm scoring a lot of points. And then you're like, okay, cool, now I'm going to push. And now a lot of my stuff has potentially died, but I've taken a lot of your pieces too. Oh, by the way, you don't have enough points to get back into the game. Too bad for you. And that's just kind of how it goes for me. But I think you play this a little bit more aggressively, right? Like
Yeah,
you go all
and I
in.
and I played this list at a GT. I got sick, unfortunately, and I was hopefully going to be on stream to demonstrate kind of what I do. But my thought process is similar to Wolf Jail. And as Dara said, you set up your staging turn. Maybe you're charging turn one, maybe you're not. That's all just a judgment call at that moment in time. But you set up your passive aggressive turn where you just stage, say, hey, you want to come get these points? It's going to hurt. And if they do, they come out, you punish them and reset. If they don't, after that, I like kind of like forcing the issue and shoving those 12 exalted 8 bound forward, and I'll even string them back to make sure the Demon Prince is still in range of them if possible, if it's safe, or try to get the cheeky angle where the Demon Prince can't really get shot at. Get my 4-up invuln, get those guys in combat, get them touching as many things as possible, getting them like those no fallback checks rolling, getting that transhuman up, getting the threat of the blood surge going. And it's gonna hurt when you lose a few of your 8 ball models. Like they're 50 points a model. It's gonna hurt. But if you keep them stuck in combat with even just a little bit of exalted 8 bound left, your wave two is gonna hit so hard. And world leaders do what world leaders do. We are very good at tabling ourselves. Most of the time by turn five in most of the games that I play, even on stream with Berserker Warband, I'm almost tabled by turn five, almost every single time. And it's because doing the mental math of what it takes to win the game. To win the game, I just have to have one more point than my opponent. As Dara said, choking them out and keeping them from actually playing the game for as long as possible is kind of our most reliable, and like easy to like execute win path. So trying to table your opponent is hard, especially if they know what they're doing. But choking them out and keeping them from standing on the funny circles is kind of the goal. So that's what this list excels at, and it's really toxic once it starts popping off.
Oh, it's
And
so toxic.
if the dice go a little bit your way and they
Oh,
just
if
start
you
failing,
skew your durability at all, it's just so insanely
and then
toxic.
and I've like at that event I looked at my opponent. I was playing against a Death Guard player, and exactly what I just described. I locked actually the Exalted Ape wrapped a Rhino and locked his Fright's first Plague Marines in the Rhino so they couldn't get out after they already blew up a bunch of screens, after they blew up a couple Predators turn one. And the game was just over. Like Mortarion came out and swung at the squad with a 4-up invuln and killed one Exalted 8 bound, and I laughed at him and like took his leg off and like did like 10 damage back because Exalted 8 bound still hurt, right?
Mm,
And I looked at him and I was like, yeah, triple six feels so much better now, doesn't it? Like, I bet you wish this was Angron instead, right? Like, everybody bitches about Angron being about around and
yeah,
reviving and me getting lucky. And I was like, this is what you get by me not running Angron, right?
yeah.
So,
No, it's a great list. I've really enjoyed it. I don't think there's too much more to say on the subject, though, right? Other than just telling people to get out there, get reps. I do think, to reiterate, if you're thinking about trying out this list, try it like 3 or 4 times before you decide if you like it or not, because the first time you try it, you're probably going to be like, I don't really get this. It's hard to accurately convey exactly how you should be using this. I think the way that we said with this sort of like choke out playstyle, and just being cautious, but knowing when to push and how to push is like the most important things. Your mileage is definitely going to vary. Depends on your opponents, what you're playing into, and all that kind of good stuff. I haven't identified like a bad matchup for this list yet, but I mean, there's probably one out there. We'll find out. Um, a lot of people running it have found really good success. Pretty much everyone in. Sorry, what are you going to say, Brian?
yeah, I was gonna say, feel free to hit up like Ryan too, because
Yeah. Oh
he
yeah.
has his
God.
own variant for
If you
vessels as
want
well.
something absolutely cooked and wild, just talk to Ryan. There was like a
This
moment in the Patreon Discord where like the majority of players were suddenly like, time to get my Land Raider out. That man is
this
absolutely cooked.
he's like 17-0 with the Lane Raider right now, guys. Like, I
I
have
ran his
no
Land
idea.
Raider list and I was like, God, this is so good, but I just don't want to paint my Land Raider.
Feels bad.
So that was that. But yeah, some really interesting innovation coming out, and try the Brosie or try like some other variant of it, or just mess around with something else. This is just a review of kind of what we think is actually like very competitive vessels list right now. One which is like not so unique to us that we think we can actually like be like, okay, here's the list. Give it a try, guys. Sort of like our next or B2K. This is kind of like the next step. We've got the BROSIE2K.
It's just a cool
Um,
list. Like,
it's just a really cool list. It's really, really fun. And like once you kind of like, I think me and Josie were talking about it this week in the chat. We were like, when this list works, when everything clicks together, it's insanely fun and feels so, so good. And yeah, it's just like it's got great game into lots of things. Again, it's another bit of a toolbox list. It's got lots of answers to different problems. High enough unit count that you can get the jobs done. I am pretty excited for like the upcoming balance slate, which is potentially in March. If we manage to scrounge enough points to change a couple of things around, I think this list becomes extremely viable, but we'll have to wait and see if that happens.
when Adepticon's right around the
And
corner, and
Adepticon's
hopefully,
right around the corner,
hope
so
fingers crossed on Codex reveals then.
hmm
Really thinking that'll be the time for World Leaders. World Easter is coming up, guys.
Mr.
So
Surgery could be pretty good with some of those
what is
enhancements and
this? What is this?
vessels.
Blood and Zeal combat or kill team?
Blood and so yeah, the
I
whatever
mean,
that's gonna
as
be.
much as I want new Bloodletter sculpts, oh please, please be like a random World Leader kill team. I would love
Yeah.
that.
Anything like anything new like that would be fun. Anyway, yeah, look, that's pretty much the video. It's been a breakdown of the Brosie 2K, how it's been so far for us, maybe inspiring you to try it out or a variant of it. Get the dogs out on the table. But yeah, let us know in the comments down below if you have tried it or if you're inspired by this or if you've got some other ideas yourself. This was very much kind of like partly spawned in our Patreon Discord. So if you want more of that good stuff and you want to support the channel, check the link down below. And aside from that, all the other YouTube clicky biddies. So like, comment, subscribe. So until the next one, I've been Dara. This has been Brian. You've been watching The Red Path. Stay healthy, stay safe, and kill, maim, burn.